Today we are going over the entire history of drugs used in ancient civilization. And right now, you're going to find out that basically every ancient civilization on Earth was running on something. And I don't mean a light herbal tea before bed. I mean full-on psychedelic ceremonies, divine mushroom rituals, opium-fueled philosophy, and a sacred cactus that takes 13 years to grow. Turns out, the ancient world was far less sober than your history teacher ever let on. And yeah, people have covered pieces of this before. But what most versions miss is the bigger pattern underneath all of it. The reason humans kept reaching for these plants across every culture, every continent, every era. Because once you see that pattern, history starts making a lot more sense. We're going through the most important substances one by one, starting with the ones that will genuinely surprise you and ending with the thing that ties all of it together. Let's get into it. So let's start with something most people have never heard of, but probably should have. Blue Lotus. Officially called Nymphea caerulea, it's a flower that grew along the Nile, and ancient Egyptians treated it like a direct line to the divine. The flower opens at dawn and closes at dusk, mirroring the daily journey of the sun god Ra. Egyptians believed the world began in darkness and water, and that from that primordial ocean, the lotus rose first, giving birth to Ra himself. Wall carvings across temples and tombs show elite Egyptians pressing their noses directly into the blooms. The Turin papyrus documents sacred temple banquets where lotus was soaked into wine and shared among the elite during festivals for Hathor, the goddess of love and war. People reportedly became intoxicated, fainted, and upon waking briefly saw the goddess's face. It was used as an aphrodisiac, a sleep aid, and a tool for communicating with the dead. The active compounds, luciferine and apomorphine, interact with dopamine and serotonin receptors. The effect isn't a full hallucination. It's more like a warm, blissful openness, deep relaxation, reduced anxiety, vivid dreams, subtle but real. And here's where it gets genuinely strange. In 2025, a UC Berkeley anthropology researcher published findings that shocked the psychedelic world. Nearly every product sold online as Egyptian Blue Lotus, on Etsy, Amazon, all of it, is a completely different species. A look-alike water lily with almost no luciferine and essentially zero psychoactive effect. Mass spectrometry confirmed it. The authentic plant is now rare and nearly impossible to find in commerce. Billions of dollars in Blue Lotus products are effectively a placebo. The sacred flower of ancient Egypt has been replaced by a fake, and almost nobody knows. But that's actually a small mystery compared to the greatest unsolved drug puzzle in all of human history. The Rig Veda, composed around 1500 BCE, contains over 350 references to a substance called Soma. Not just a drink, a god. The entire ninth book of the Rig Veda is dedicated to Soma alone. Gods drank it to defeat demons. Priests consumed it to achieve divine clarity. One hymn reads, "We have drunk Soma and become immortal. We have seen the light and found the gods." That is one of the oldest recorded drug experiences in human history, and it was written as a prayer. The preparation was elaborate. Stalks soaked in water, crushed with stone presses, filtered through wool, then mixed with milk and honey. Priests chanted specific sacred songs only during Soma sessions, possibly because the sounds interacted with the altered state itself. The described effects include immunity to death, the ability to see gods, fearlessness, physical power, and a sensation of flying. And here's the thing. By around 800 BCE, the original plant was already lost. Brahmins began using substitutes, with apology hymns to the gods for the inferior replacement. They still perform the Soma ritual today, with a substitute plant, still apologizing. Over 200 years of scholarship, 100-plus botanical candidates proposed. The top contenders include Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric mushroom, proposed by banker-turned-mycologist Gordon Wasson in 1968, ephedra, which Zoroastrians still use as Haoma today, Psilocybin mushrooms, Cannabis, Syrian rue. None of them fully satisfy every description in the hymns. One of the most important religious substances in all of human history, the foundation of Vedic civilization, ancestor of Hinduism and possibly Zoroastrianism, and we genuinely have no idea what it was. That mystery has never been solved. Cannabis, though, is the opposite problem. We know exactly what it is. We know exactly how long humans have used it, and the history is so much stranger than the modern debate suggests. Evidence of cannabis use goes back to around 8000 BCE in Central Asia, possibly the oldest cultivated plant in human history. By 2700 BCE, it appeared in Chinese medical texts. The Vedic Atharva Veda called it sacred grass, one of 5 holy plants given to humanity by the god Indra. A 2019 archaeological discovery confirmed ritual cannabis smoking in a 2,500-year-old Chinese burial site, wooden braziers burning resinous buds inside the tomb. And then there were the Scythians, who were honestly something else entirely. Iron Age nomadic warriors who dominated Eurasia from 800 to 300 BCE. When their king died, they spent 40 days carrying his body around the territory, then built small felt tents over heated stones, threw cannabis onto them, crawled inside, and howled with pleasure. Herodotus documented this in 440 BCE like it was a perfectly ordinary funeral custom. They also spread cannabis across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa as they moved. The Roman physician Galen wrote that cannabis seeds were eaten at dinner parties to stimulate an appetite for drinking. Ancient Israel may have used it in temple rituals. Ethiopian Coptic elders call it their Eucharist. Rastafarians call it a biblical sacrament. In 2015, researchers found cannabis residue in pipe fragments from Shakespeare's garden in Stratford-upon-Avon. Several of his sonnets contain cryptic references to a noted weed that inspires invention. The global legal cannabis industry exceeded $57 billion in 2023, built entirely on 8,000 years of normalized human use that was criminalized for exactly one anomalous 90-year period in the 20th century, almost entirely due to U.S. political pressure in the 1930s. The drug war against cannabis wasn't a response to a new danger, it was an interruption of something ancient. Now, if you want to go deeper on the ancient world's relationship with consciousness, stay with me, because we're just getting to the part that gets genuinely hard to explain. Psilocybin mushrooms. Stone paintings in the Sahara from around 9000 BCE appear to show mushroom-headed figures in ecstatic states, possibly the oldest drug art on Earth. Rock paintings in Spain from around 4000 BCE suggest ritual use of Psilocybe hispanica. The Aztecs called them Teonanacatl, flesh of the gods, given to their ancestors by the serpent god Quetzalcoatl. They used them to communicate with deities, to anesthetize pain during ritual sacrifice, and to divine the future. In ancient Greece, the Eleusinian mysteries, attended by Plato, Aristotle, and multiple emperors, involved a psychedelic brew called kykeon that likely contained ergot fungus, the precursor to LSD, and possibly psilocybin. These were not fringe practices. These were the foundational religious experiences of Western civilization. The stoned ape theory takes this further, and it's controversial enough that it's worth explaining clearly. Ethnobotanist Terence McKenna proposed that early hominids in Africa eating psilocybin mushrooms, which grow naturally in cattle dung, experienced dramatic increases in visual acuity and neural connectivity, potentially catalyzing the emergence of language, art, religion, and symbolic thought. Most mainstream scientists reject it as too speculative, but paleoanthropologist Lee Berger, one of the most prominent figures in the field, now takes it seriously enough to actively investigate it in South Africa's fossil record. The idea that fungi shaped human consciousness is no longer just a stoner theory. It's a live scientific question. And here's the modern punchline. Psilocybin is now a breakthrough therapy at Johns Hopkins for depression, PTSD, and addiction. The molecule that built Aztec religion and Greek philosophy is the most promising antidepressant of the 21st century. It was classified as having no medical value for 50 years. Ayahuasca is in a different category altogether, and once you understand how it works, the discovery story becomes almost impossible to explain rationally. The brew is made from 2 plants, the Banisteriopsis caapi vine, which contains MAO inhibitors, and Psychotria viridis leaves, which contain DMT. Here's the thing. Without the vine, DMT is completely destroyed by stomach enzymes. The 2 plants only work together. The Amazon contains at least 80,000 plant species. Out of all of them, indigenous shamans identified these 2 specific plants, understood that they needed to be combined, and created a brew that activates one of the most powerful psychedelic experiences ever documented. Modern chemistry needed laboratory equipment to figure out why this combination works. When anthropologists asked shamans across 75 different tribes how they discovered it, they gave the same answer. The plants told us. Archaeological evidence places ayahuasca ceremonies back to at least 2,400 BCE. In 2010, researchers found a shaman's pouch in Bolivia, made from 3 fox snouts sewn together, containing confirmed chemical evidence of ayahuasca preparation, dated to about 1,000 years ago. The pouch held plant species from across the continent, proving the shaman was connected to a vast trade network. Ceremonies last all night. Participants report contact with ancestors, encounters with non-human entities, and communication with what they describe as plant spirits. It's also used diagnostically. Shamans enter the spirit world to identify the source of a patient's illness. DMT is now being studied for conditions like depression and addiction, but it has no approved medical use in the United States. But not every ancient drug was used for transcendence, though. Some were used for power, survival, and things considerably darker. Like coca leaves have been chewed in the Andes for at least 10,000 years. The plant contains less than 1% cocaine alkaloids, roughly equivalent to a strong cup of coffee. At high altitude, it dramatically improves oxygen efficiency, suppresses hunger, and prevents altitude sickness. Inca runners carrying messages across thousands of miles of mountain trails chewed it continuously. The Inca Empire used it as political currency, so sacred that initially only the emperor, priests, and nobles could access it. When the Spanish conquered the Inca, the church briefly tried to ban coca as diabolical, then quickly reversed course and expanded production to sustain enslaved indigenous workers in brutal silver and mercury mines. In 1859, Albert Niemann isolated cocaine from coca leaves in a German university lab. Within decades, it was in Vin Mariani, the Pope's favorite wine. Sigmund Freud called it a miracle drug. By the early 1900s, cocaine addiction was devastating populations worldwide. The traditional leaf, chewed gently for 10,000 years with no documented addiction epidemic, had been turned into an industrial extraction product causing mass dependency. In 2006, Bolivia's Evo Morales chewed coca leaves during a UN speech to protest international drug policy. The UN Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs technically banned traditional coca chewing in 1961, making 10,000 years of Andean cultural practice a violation of international law. The cocaine is extracted by a single DEA-authorized New Jersey company. Coca-Cola is the only legal cocaine importer in the United States. But the most mind-bending one is still ahead, like Datura, which is in a completely different moral universe from everything else on this list. Ancient Incas used it in sacred ceremonies. The oracles of Delphi may have inhaled its vapors before prophecy. Chumash Indians of California ingested its seeds to commune with deities. In medieval Europe, it was a primary ingredient in witches' flying ointment, combined with belladonna, henbane, and mandrake, applied via broomstick to the armpits and mucous membranes. A papal physician documented this in the 1500s and confirmed the ointments produced vivid flying dreams. That is the actual pharmacological origin of witches riding broomsticks, an application method documented by a doctor to the Pope. Unlike psilocybin or mescaline, Datura doesn't produce visions you know aren't real. It produces true delirium. Users interact with people who aren't there, conduct full conversations with furniture, commit violence, and have no memory afterward. The dose between a trip and a fatal overdose is razor thin, and every plant has a different alkaloid concentration. In 1676, British soldiers in Jamestown, Virginia ate it thinking it was edible greens. They spent 11 days completely delirious, naked, rolling in their own filth, blowing feathers in the air, smiling at their commanders with no recognition of who they were. The town gave the plant its American name, Jimsonweed. In Haiti, anthropologist Wade Davis documented how dark sorcerers use a Datura preparation to zombify victims, inducing a death-like state, then reviving them in a psychologically destroyed condition. Scopolamine extracted from Datura is now used as devil's breath by criminals in Colombia to make victims completely compliant and amnesiac. Victims have handed over bank PINs, entire home contents, and signed over property with no memory of any of it. That is why Datura belongs in a different category, not a vision plant, but a plant associated with delirium, amnesia, poisoning, and control. If you've made it this far and you're finding this as fascinating as I do, hit subscribe and drop a comment. I want to know which of these surprised you most because I genuinely cannot pick one. And if you want to go deeper on any single one of these substances, let me know in the comment section. I'll come up with the second part. But first, let's land this plane properly, because there's a pattern underneath all of this that matters. Every single substance in this video follows the same arc. An ancient plant used ceremonially and medicinally for thousands of years. Western chemistry isolates its active alkaloid. Production gets industrialized. Mass dependency follows. Panic, criminalization of the plant and usually of the original users too. Then, decades later, science rediscovers what indigenous cultures already knew. Morphine from the opium poppy, cocaine from coca, amphetamine synthesized from ephedra, used in Chinese medicine for 2,000 years. Cannabis was criminalized in 1937 after 8,000 years of normalized use. Psilocybin, DMT, mescaline, all with 5,000 to 10,000 year histories of ceremonial use, classified as having no medical value in 1970. MDMA cures PTSD in 67% of cases in MAPS Phase 3 trials. Ibogaine eliminates opioid addiction in a single session. Ayahuasca resolves addiction and PTSD with effects lasting years. These are unprecedented results in psychiatry, and the global pharmaceutical industry, worth $1.48 trillion annually, is built almost entirely on molecules first discovered in plants used by indigenous peoples. Morphine from the poppy, all local anesthetics traced back to Coca, aspirin from willow bark, quinine from cinchona bark. The world's largest industry is, at its root, industrialized ethnobotany, and the people who discovered these plants received nothing for it. So here's where we started. Ancient people used drugs. Here's where we actually ended up. Ancient people developed sophisticated, carefully observed, ceremonially contained relationships with plants that modern science is only now beginning to understand. They used them to reduce pain, survive extreme conditions, bond socially, communicate with the divine, and explore consciousness. And every controversy we have today about medicine, addiction, legality, spirituality, and the nature of the mind itself started thousands of years ago with plants, fungi, flowers, and leaves. The strange part was never that ancient people used drugs. The strange part is that we thought we were the first ones to figure any of this out.